Hello, folks. Welcome to yet another Neighbors on Call event. It's very good to have everybody here tonight. Thanks so much for coming and to hear Representative Ricky Hurtado, who has a new haircut, and from Representative Brian Farkas. I'm Susan Blunt, one of the directors of Neighbors on Call, and Becca Zirkin, our other directors here too. You'll hear from her in a little bit. Yeah, if you're not familiar with us, Neighbors on Call is an all-volunteer organization, and our primary goal is to elect Democrats to the North Carolina General Assembly. Now, before we turn the program over to Representative Hurtado and Farkas, we want to take a moment to discuss how coming to this meeting and the actions we're going to ask you to take at the end fit into NOC's strategy for winning the 2022 legislative elections. First of all, a quick primer on where we are in the General Assembly. In 2016, you can see that the Republicans held a supermajority in both chambers. That little green line marks the supermajority cutoff. That meant they could override the governor's veto. Then in 2018, the Democrats broke the Republican supermajority in both chambers. In 2020, the Dems gained a little in the Senate and lost some in the House, but we still held off a supermajority in both chambers. Now let's drill down a little more closely at the State House. Before the 2020 election, the Republicans held 65 seats. 72 would have given them the supermajority, and Dems had 55. Last November in 2020, the Democrats lost 6 of those seats, but they flipped 2 new ones. So the current math is Republicans hold 69 seats. They are only 3 away from a supermajority. So it's really, really important that we hold those flipped seats. Now let's drill down a little further. Who was it that flipped those seats and by how much? First, Representative Ricky Hurtado flipped a seat in Alamance County. NOC was proud to help him do it too. He won by only 477 votes. And we know that his district could get redrawn in the upcoming redistricting in a way that might make it harder for him to win that seat again. The other seat was flipped by Representative Brian Farkas of Pitt County. NOC was not involved in his campaign, but county to county, or C2C, you may be familiar with, their volunteers did help with that race. Representative Farkas won by 869 votes.
So how does this inform our work in 2021? We can't know yet what all the districts are going to look like. And without the districts, we don't know who all the candidates will be. But clearly, we do have wonderful incumbents that we want to keep in place. With the help of Amy Cox from Flip NC and the House and Senate caucuses, we know some key areas to start applying our efforts. And as we've heard from several sources, from Wisconsin to Georgia, early work is just as important, if not more important, than election season work. And we'll never have enough time to reach every voter anyway. So we need to be making voter contact now. Neighbors on Call will focus on races that are most likely to be contested, as advised by Flip NC and the NCGA caucuses. We're already in full swing working with Representative Hurtado since March. And we will be working with Representative Farkas, joining phone banks starting in June, and then adding on our target areas gradually. Here's our approach. We will always give NOC volunteers a chance to get to know each target incumbent, which means more events like we're doing tonight, followed by opportunities to contact voters in the incumbent's district. And as we get more information, we will certainly be adjusting our target list and being careful not to spread NOC resources too thin. So what kinds of things will you be doing? A mix of canvasses, literature jobs, and phone banks. Canvassing is, as we know, the most effective way to contact voters. But phone banking does extend our reach and enables participation by volunteers across the state and out of state, and it all helps. So look for a mix of actions. As always, the actions, whether they're phone banks or canvases, will be organized either by the incumbents or groups like County to County. And our job is to organize the volunteers for those actions and then to support them. The silver lining of the pandemic is that thanks to this virtual Zoom world, people are joining our events from around the state and even from outside of North Carolina. So to harness this new energy and increase our muscle and therefore our impact, NOC will make 2 organizational changes, one for people who are outside the state, which is a very special brand of committed volunteers, and one for North Carolinians who are outside the triangle, and especially in areas where we are targeting incumbents. And our leadership team is already working on these initiatives, and we will tell you more about them when all of our ducks are in a row. So tonight, we're very grateful to have Representative Hurtado here to give us some updates from Raleigh, especially after crossover week, and take our questions. And as a bonus, Representative Farkas has very graciously agreed to join us for a quick cameo appearance. And you will have another opportunity soon to get to know him even better. First, we're going to hear a little more about what incumbent protection looks like from Representatives Farkas and Hurtado. And then we'll hear an update from Raleigh, and we expect to have a lot of time for audience Q&A with Representative Hurtado at the end and wrap up by 8:30. Representative Ricky Hurtado was elected in 2020 to represent House District 63 in Alamance County. He is the son of working class immigrants from El Salvador. He grew up in rural North Carolina, graduated from UNC as a Moorhead Kane Scholar, and earned a master's degree in public affairs at Princeton University. He's now on the faculty at UNC Chapel Hill. Representative Hurtado has worked hard to make sure that education works for all people. He led the Scholars Latino Initiative at UNC that pairs first-generation college students with mentors, founded Latinx Ed, an advocacy, leadership development, and public awareness organization, and worked extensively with Alamance Achieves, a community-driven initiative to ensure that every child in Alamance is educated, equipped, and engaged in the community. Representative Brian Farkas was elected in 2020 to represent House District 9 in Pitt County in Eastern North Carolina. Representative Farkas was raised in Pitt and works as the Director of Development and Client Relations at JFK Architecture, where he helps small towns and community colleges craft master plans to meet their long-term goals. He previously specialized in emergency management at the National Institutes of Health and worked for the U.S. Attorney's Office. At home, much of Representative Farkas's activism has focused on economic development aimed at bringing jobs to Pitt County, Greenville, and Eastern North Carolina. Gentlemen, welcome. We are eager to hear from you about incumbent protection. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Great to see everyone. And yeah, I'm happy to be the new guy here in the so it's wonderful. And thank you for letting me be a guest on the night where I get to ask a few questions here with the best seatmate I could possibly ask for in the house, and that's Ricky Hurtado. Ricky has been, he and I sit in seats 117 and 118 way in the back row. And we've been buddies ever since day one. So, but I know we're supposed to ask a few questions here about incumbent protection and experience with your organization. And so I'll jump right into it first, because I wanted to ask Ricky, as the veteran in this and the beneficiary of your program, what's it like to have this organization help your campaign? What's that meant?
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Brian. And thank you so much, neighbors on call. Always a treat to get together. We are holding it down in the back row there in the General Assembly. So appreciate the support to get us there to that back row. I wanted to start by something that I missed who said it, but something in the chat that said, "Welcome to the family, Brian." I mean, I think I literally texted you that earlier this week, right? I said, "Welcome to the NOC family."
Right.
This is truly what it feels like when Neighbors on Call comes to your door. That's what it feels like. Neighbors coming to chat with you about a candidate, a campaign, but more importantly, a vision for North Carolina. And I think that's what I love about this organization. I've joked before that NOC feels like, the Avenger movies where Captain America's getting beat up and he's on the ground, and then all the circles pop up around you, and all the Marvel crew comes to save the day. All the folks coming to save the day, that's NOC for you, because that's what they did for me. They did countless hours of phone banking for me during the election. They knocked on doors when we could. and socially distanced, lit dropped in that last crucial month. I truly don't believe I would have won the election without the support of Knock. And so, like Isabel said, welcome to the Knock family, because it is certainly really nice to have folks that are experienced. And even if they are new canvassers or phone makers, always know where to get support and an infrastructure that works. And I think that's what I've always been impressed by, and really thrilled that you get to be a beneficiary of that support as well.
Yeah, I'm absolutely honored.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. It is awesome. You'll be thanking them a lot over these next few weeks, and trust me. But speaking of supporting you, right? We've sort of hit our rhythm in Alamance, where we sort of talk back and forth around what makes sense when it comes to conversations in Alamance County and how we approach that. But what about in Pitt County? What will Knock volunteers be talking about when they call your constituents?
Great. Yeah, great question. Well, I mean, my race was very much like yours, very tight, as we saw in the early presentation. And sorry, my dog is shaking out in the background here. Yeah, it's an area with a heavy independent spirit. As an example, I grew up in a household of all unaffiliated voters, and I'm the Democrat, the proud Democrat in the family. But it definitely really looked to the candidate to be the one that drives them. So I think when this organization really pops in and Neighbors on Call calls, that I think it will be very important for us early for you all as an organization to establish that relationship as well. And so what's really exciting is we're at a time when we don't have to ask neighbors of Pitt County to actually vote for me yet. We can engage in a more authentic relationship building way that just checks in and sees how someone's doing. I love the idea that this organization could go, Representative Farkas has been in for a few months, and we want to listen. And what are the issues impacting you, whether it's COVID or, how school's been impacted by COVID? What are you dealing with? And I think there's some really valuable data that we'll be able to gather. I think is going to really help the callers understand the dynamics of the district and help you down the road when we actually get closer to the election already speak to the issues that might be impacting people in Pitt County. I mean, Medicaid expansion is a huge thing. So I would expect that with the cost of healthcare, that would be something that you would hear early on. In Eastern North Carolina, where we've got a disproportionate amount of poor people east of 95, that you would hear that in your phone calls. I think you would hear a lot about Pitt County having a poverty rate over 20% for over 20 years, which makes this a persistent poverty county. I think there'll be some similarities and parallels to probably what you're dealing with in Alamance County. And when we've sat in the back row and we've kind of talked about it, I think we've kind of identified some of those already, Ricky. But I think that the way we're looking to probably get this thing up and running with the opportunity to call and not have an ask is going to be really, really great, and is going to be more effective when ideally that same caller calls that same person down the road and you've already got the relationship, or maybe they remember you from the call before, and you can say, I remember talking about this issue, and I really think Rep Farkas is the guy. So I think that's going to go a long way. I would say that's probably where we would start with this organization. And another organization like County to County kind of did that as well too. And so we've got an ability to kind of learn from what worked and what did in the past, so that Neighbors on Call can absolutely hit the ground running from day one. And so I'm really excited to have you. I love Eastern North Carolina. I grew up out in that area, and so knowing that you'll all be out there, in a way, I'll be able to showcase the state, even if you're on phone calls, and we'll get you all the information that you need to really have fun and have a successful dial. So now I know, and I understand from what I understand with how you've been doing things, Ricky, that you've already have people knocking doors and canvassing. That's really, really exciting. And I know we're going to try to stand that up a little bit myself. In a few weekends, I'll be out there knocking, and again, doing what the callers are going to do, doing some listening. But what are volunteers for Neighbors on Call? What are they talking about when they knock on doors with your constituents? And what are you hearing, and what are the issues that they're talking about?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think you framed it really well as to the approach, very similar to ours. It is a bit of a luxury to be able to have conversations and listen without necessarily have to be having the, sometimes tough conversations about how they're voting, and trying to persuade them to vote for you, right? And so part of our reasoning as to why we wanted to start so early, and was so happy that the NOC team was willing to start this journey with us in March of 2021, right? Was the urgent need in the community around vaccines. There was a bit of a lag in Alamance County when it came to vaccine outreach and distribution, especially in Black and Brown communities, and we want to do something about it. And we felt that we were in a position to do that, given our relationship with volunteers, given our position in the county, and then just, again, given the need in the community. And so we've been doing that through phone calls, and now this weekend we'll be going out in the community and having those same conversations, where now we know that the eligibility in terms of age has changed since the last time that we're on doors. And so we might be knocking on doors of people who already have been vaccinated, and folks who we may have already talked to in some capacity, but now their children may be eligible. And so there's a new message to get out there that their kids might be eligible for the Pfizer vaccine and where they can get that. So it's really opportune timing for us to go to the doors again, to continue talking about vaccine outreach and distribution. And the second half of that conversation is exactly what you said. What else is on your mind? We know that public health is one of the biggest issues, but not the only issue that folks are worried about right now when we think about public schools and how that reopening has been going for them. When we think about unemployment and economic insecurity, housing instability has been a big topic of conversation in Alamance. This weekend, I do have to flag this. We are intentionally targeting a precinct where I didn't do so hot, and it's actually a mystery to me. And part of the reason why we're targeting it, I performed just at par or better than every Democratic candidate in our county, in every precinct, when you compare my numbers to Biden, to Cunningham, to other folks. But the precinct that we're targeting this weekend is just south of Mebane, in the Mebane area. I lagged really behind all the Democratic candidates, and it's unclear why, right? So, I mean, it's just an anomaly. And so we really want to make inroads there. We really want to build relationships with folks because that is part of the strategy, in making sure that we can play this incumbent protection this year and protect the seat is Democrats, right? Democrats that didn't vote for me, why not, right? Making sure they know that they have a representative that is fighting for them and meeting them where they are. And so I am actually very curious how this weekend goes. I don't expect hostility, right? But it will be an interesting conversation because it is a precinct where my numbers did lack a little bit. And so certainly we'll be out there with our volunteers knocking on doors as well to make sure we're building those relationships and seeing what's on folks' mind this year.
That's great. I love that. The meeting where people are. I mean, and as opposed to, sometimes I think there's the temptation where a candidate will, just only stay in the comfort zone. And sometimes you got to push yourself out of that. And I think that's the only way, it's particularly districts like ours, where you win an election by going out that comfort zone a little bit and growing. That's the perfect idea. And I know that's going to be a great use of everyone's time here too. I mean, that's phenomenal planning, and I'm glad you've got that data.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, Brian, I know your time is valuable tonight, and I know we're getting ready for a session tomorrow. So I want to wrap up here with one final question to you. I've had the privilege of getting to know you over the last few months, since we're down there in the trenches together in the back row in the General Assembly. But when will folks get to know you better? Because you have a great story, and your roots in Pitt run deep, and you just have a really great vision for Eastern North Carolina, which I really appreciate, because your passion for the region really exudes in all of your bills and all the comments that you've made on the floor so far. So when does everybody else get to hear that?
Well, I appreciate that. Well, I believe we've got an event scheduled where we'll be talk a little bit more about the House 9 race and my candidacy. I think that'll present us a great opportunity. On June 8th, stay tuned. We'll get some more of the details out on that. We'll do something that allows people to get to know me, and that way, when you're making these calls down the road, you've heard it straight from the source. I'm real excited to share a little bit about the East. It's home. I grew up there. I'm a product of all the schools, and I've lived in other parts of the state, but I knew when I moved east, if I ever wanted to offer myself in public service, that it needed to be from Pitt County, the place that, you know, schools and community programs invested in me. So I can't wait to share more about that with you, and why I love serving Pitt County, why I love this job. So June 8th, put it on your calendar, and we'll get the details out. And I can't wait to see everybody. And in the meantime, I hope the rest of tonight's event goes really well. You all have worked so hard, and it is already paying off on the floor of the House with Representative Hurtado. He's the real deal, folks. And I'm proud to call him a friend and work with him on a number of bills. And sky's the limit. So let's do everything we can to keep him.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, both of you, so much. I have to say, I'm a little relieved to find out I kept seeing that you were seatmates, and I thought perhaps you had to share the same chair. So
it gets tight, but not that tight. Yeah.
Well, we're excited about supporting both of your campaigns and eager to get to know you on June 8th. So we're encouraging all of our NOC volunteers to attend that event that's being put on by C2C. In fact, at this very moment, folks in the audience, if you don't mind, sign up right now, even if you're not sure you can attend, because that way you'll get the notices and so on. And we hope you will eventually sign up. It should be a good evening, and you'll get to hear more than just a couple of minutes of Representative Farkas. And then something else we're asking you to do tonight. Please sign up to talk to the constituents in these two representatives districts. We have the, as Representative Hurtado mentioned, we have the canvas on Sunday, and I thought it was so interesting to learn that the particular nature of that precinct. I think that'll really make it interesting. So thanks for telling us that. So sign up to do that. Now, if you haven't canvassed before, you're just a little reluctant, you can sign up when you RSVP as a silent canvasser. You will be assigned to someone who will be your mentor. And it's a great way to break in and learn how to do canvassing. And it's a great way to make a new friend too. So we encourage everybody to do that. And those of you who are pros, you might think about offering your services as a mentor at some point. So that'll be great. And then on June 14th, we would love for you to sign up to phone bank for Representative Farkas. Now, you know, having a silent partner for phone banking doesn't work quite as well. So we have a different system for supporting people on phone banks. You will get a phone bank buddy who will be there to help you get started. There are a bunch of little things you got to click on here and there. So the phone bank buddy will help you get started, and then will be available during the rest of the phone bank if you have questions or problems. So most people have reported just how much it's helped them to have, whether it's a phone bank buddy or a Canvas mentor, but those supports make it much easier for people to get started and makes them more likely to come back too. So we encourage everybody to try that out. So thanks, Representative Farkas, for your cameo appearance tonight. It's just been great, and we look forward to seeing you again June 8th. Thanks. Night.
Thanks so much. Good night.
So Representative Hurtado, we know last week was a very, very busy week for both of you. And thank you for all that you're doing to fight for what is right in Raleigh. So to get us started on talking about what's going on there, can you please explain what crossover means? And then just give us some of the highlights from this session so far leading up to crossover.
Yeah, of course, of course. This was my first crossover. Folks made a pretty big deal about it, but a few of the sophomores were teasing me that it wasn't as brutal as it typically is. It wasn't it was a little unfair for them, and since we got off a little easy. What crossover is essentially the deadline when bills have to literally cross over from chamber to chamber. And so there's always a rush at this deadline to pass whatever bills you'd like to continue surviving from the House to the Senate and from the Senate to the House. And so if your bill does not pass by the crossover date, it's essentially dead for the biennium. And so for 2 years until the next odd long session. There are a few exceptions to that when it comes to bills that may have an appropriation, so it will impact the budget, or bills that may impact taxes in some capacity. So bills that deal with money, still have an opportunity to be heard in the future, but the remainder of those bills have to pass by crossover. And so that was sort of the rush of the beginning of May, the last 2 weeks, but especially last week. We heard, I believe, we counted the bills, and it was close to 180 bills within the span of a week. So busy week. stayed on Tuesday night until about 10:30. And it wasn't, had a pretty late night session on Monday as well. It wasn't too bad on Wednesday, and we were able to get out there a day early actually. And so the Senate and the House both wrapped up before noon on Thursday. And so this has been a bit of an easier week, a little slow as now we begin to really ramp up for the budget, which will be the sort of the next big thing as we continue to not just read the Senate bills now, but also get into budget negotiations between the House and the Senate, as well as the governor, to see if we can get an actual budget passed this year, since we know that was a tough call or a tough battle in the 2018-2019 session. A few of the highlights from crossovers: there was good bills, there were bad bills, and there were downright terrible bills. This is also the time when incomplete ideas get across from chambers with the sometimes false promises that it will be fixed in the Senate or it will be fixed in the House. So that is something you often hear when folks don't have time to amend it or continue working on the bill and just want to make sure that it crosses over to the other side. A few of the bad bills that passed over to the Senate were several. I won't lie, there were several, but I'll highlight a few of them. They continue to pass or push, I should say, bills around sort of opening access to who can carry firearms and where. And so we had HB 47, which was allowing elected officials at all levels of government to carry their concealed weapons while on, quote unquote duty, while sort of they're serving in their official capacity, which would mean we would begin to see guns in our, potentially in our Board of Education meetings, in our county commissioner meetings, in our General Assembly meetings. And just, you could just hear from the arguments that it was political in nature and want to continue to push this narrative that to make our community safer, we just need to arm everyone. And so that was, we stood our ground and we debated those bills, but unfortunately with majority they passed. I don't foresee them making them into law, but certainly something that they continue pushing. The other bills that disturbed me more than anything, given my background as an educator, were a lot of the sort of academic freedom bills that were being passed, or at least pushed forward as academic freedom bills. There were two in particular that I think are some of the worst bills that we've seen in education in recent years. One was around academic transparency, which would require all educators to post everything that they're teaching, all the books that they're reading online. There are already requirements in how teachers have to report their syllabi and everything else they're teaching to their schools and their leadership. And it's accessible to anyone, right? If you want to know what your children's teacher is teaching in the classroom, you just have to request it. But they want this to be uploaded online to be transparent for everyone to see. I mean, I'm pro transparency, but what's really the narrative that folks are driving here is sort of this wedge that they're trying to create between educators and parents around the indoctrination of our students. And we've seen this narrative being pushed by Mark Robertson, as well as the Republican Party, where they're going to make indoctrination and critical race theory is the term that they're using, at least, as talking points during these next elections, which is really troublesome because it's dishonest and really misconstrues a lot of the diversity, equity, and inclusion work that's being done in our schools when it comes to culturally sensitive training, culturally competent curricula. When we think about representation in our schools, it is being misconstrued and being weaponized against our students, which I think is just incredibly disappointing, but not surprising at all. The other bill that came coupled with that academic transparency bill was the Ensuring Dignity and Non-Discrimination of Schools. And you'll catch a pattern here. The titles are the opposite of what they're supposed to do. And so this was essentially a censorship bill that would really muffle what teachers could teach in the classroom, essentially really trying to whitewash history when it comes to some of the challenging conversations that we have to have about what's happened in our country and what's happening in our communities, really wanting to muffle teachers when it comes to challenging conversations around race and gender and sexuality and things of that nature. we know this was incredibly political in nature because immediately after it passed, some of the most right-wing extremist groups that were really supporting and advocating around this bill had a Facebook Live with Steve Bannon celebrating the passage of this bill. And so that's how deep some of this advocacy goes. And it is very much a part of a nationwide movement that is really trying to latch on to this narrative around critical race theory to really punish students, punish teachers, and really try to roll back some of the progress we've made when it comes to seeing true representation in our classrooms. And so very troublesome, very problematic, really continue to see what that happens when we have those conversations in the Senate and then with the governor, but they're just not good bills. They're just not good bills. And so the bills for those is HB 324. The academic transparency bill, I think it's 755, but I'm not entirely sure. But I think if you missed the stories on this, you can just read the News and Observer from the last week. Essentially, it's the articles that equate this bill to book burning, because that's essentially what the Republicans are trying to do, is really censor what books we can and cannot teach in the classroom. And so that was some of the worst things that we saw in session. The other, we also saw attacks on women's right to choose and reproductive health issues. These again follow patterns of the types of legislation that are being passed across the country in more conservative legislatures. So certainly coordinated in nature as they continue to make attacks on Roe v. Wade. And so stay tuned. We're going to continue to stand our ground and fight these battles in both the House and the Senate. Thankfully, we have been having good conversations with our colleagues, and we'll see that we can continue to uphold the governor's veto on some of these bad bills, depending on what makes his desk. So we're certainly keep y'all updated on that. I did get 2 bills that I supported pass, which was exciting. That's my highlight, Becca. So maybe not state highlight, but they're local bills, things that impact Alamance County. We'll see if they make it through the Senate. One of them doesn't have much of a shot because we know that the Senate doesn't typically like these bills, the calendar flexibility bills, but local communities want to see greater flexibility in their calendars. And so we pushed that in Alamance County, as well as a bill to lift up the statewide recognition of the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation, which was something that's important for our Indigenous community here in Alamance County, and something that I worked with our representative from Robertson County to make sure that happened. And so if I can go on, but I know these are brief highlights here for crossover. If you tune into the Ricky Report on Facebook Live or get my emails, I'll be including this week some of the bills that we worked on as Democrats to get sponsored and introduced this year that didn't make crossover, because I think there was a lot of really great ideas that were also incorporated in the governor's budget that didn't make the crossover deadline, given who controls the majority. But a lot happened in the last few weeks, and we'll have another few weeks that will be really busy in the General Assembly as well.
Thank you. And I'm sure it was hard to boil that down because there were hundreds of bills, but thank you. We have many questions, and we're going to use most of the time tonight to take audience questions, because we know our folks ask really good questions. So Patience Vanderbush, who's one of the Knock East chapter leaders, and Bonnie McCarthy, who is one of the former chapter leaders of Knock South, but still always raring to go. They're here handling the Q&A. And if you have questions, you can put them in the chat if you haven't yet. So Patience, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. I'll start with a couple of questions that people emailed in to us. Yoshi, who lives in Representative Farkas's district, wanted to know, which bills do you think are going to make it to Governor Cooper's desk that we're going to have to rely on him to veto as our stoppage against the craziness the Republicans are trying to get away with? And what can we do other than depend upon the governor and our veto-proof numbers in the legislature?
Yeah, that's a great question. I never want to put words in the governor's mouth on what he will not veto, because we have those conversations daily. And so, but bills that I do anticipate passing are a lot of these education bills that I just mentioned. They seem to really be wanting to push this narrative statewide and across the nation. And it even, the thing I was most disappointed in was that for this HB 324, essentially the book burning bill, our state superintendent, who I've been in spaces with on a number of different issues, could get on board with a lot of what she was sharing. She came out and was very vocal on this bill, which was extremely disappointing. And so I think that if it has that sort of support and it's something that they're pushing from the top down, I do anticipate it passing the Senate. I will say that this is probably also backlash to the new social studies standards that we pushed or that we passed at the State Board of Education a few months ago. Folks seem to be really upset about that, or folks on the right seem to be upset about that, and it was a point of contention, especially with the lieutenant governor, which is when he started his task force on teacher indoctrination, or whatever he was calling it, facts, right, or something. And so it seems to be, again, fear mongering and a playbook to divide our communities by misleading folks as to what's being taught. I saw another question in the chat about how they're defining critical race theory. They're not. So really anything that has to do with race or talking about race, they're defining as critical race theory. And so that is part of the narrative that they're pushing. And so we're really trying to change that narrative to really think about what it means to teach in an inclusive, culturally competent environment. Because I think at first glance folks can agree that, yeah, we shouldn't be, teaching folks that, someone's oppressed and one's the oppressor, or things of that nature. And so, but I think it's a slippery slope to get into shouting matches with them about definitions, because they don't care about the truth or the definitions, unfortunately.
Okay. Another question that we got online was, why did you vote for HB 805, which establishes new penalties for rioting, given that the ACLU and some other groups have opposed that bill and because of what they say would be the chilling effect it could have on peaceful and constitutionally protected protests?
Yeah, that's a great question, and was part of my update at Dem Women last night here locally in Alamance County. That was the other set of bad bills that I didn't get a chance to get into this session, where we did see bills that are, I guess being called anti-protester bills in both the Senate and the House, SB 300 and HB 805. Part of the crossover for me was making tough decisions in a really fast-paced environment. And so it is a bad bill, and we're going to continue fighting that bad bill. It is something where that battle is by no means over. We're going to continue trying to amend that bill and seeing what conversations we can have in the Senate. We're going to continue to have conversations with the governor in terms of what that looks like in stopping that bill from becoming law. What I will say as to if I'm saying it's a bad bill, why did I vote for it, right? There was quite a few things that happened with that bill. It was worse than it currently is, if you can believe that, where it would criminalize a much broader set of people who were protesting and exercising their First Amendment rights. Some of our members were able to amend that bill on the floor and take some of the worst parts of the language out of that bill. And so once it was amended, it was a sort of a game time. You have 15 seconds to vote decision on whether you're going to support the bill or not support the bill. We know that this bill is political in nature. We know that they're trying to catch vulnerable members like me in a bad vote that will essentially say that if I voted against it, that I'm for rioting and for the destruction of our small businesses in Grand, given everything that's happening locally. It was a tough vote, but I did know that my vote wasn't going to be the swing vote, where it would be the one that determined whether this bill passed to law. I will say that if that was the case, I would have voted no 100 times out of 100. And so it was a tough vote. I've spoken to the ACLU about it. I've spoken to a lot of community groups locally in Alamance County that were surprised and frustrated with my vote as well. But we were able to talk through it and also talk about, the support we need to make sure that, we continue advocating against bills like this. And so I think that's the hard reality right now with some of these vulnerable districts, like Brian's, like mine, right? That we're going to have to take some tough votes in order to keep the veto beyond 2022 and continue fighting. But we'll see. We'll see where this leads, because this might be some of the bills that end up on the governor's desk that he wants to veto. We're not quite sure yet. We haven't had those conversations. But if it does come to that, then my vote will matter a lot more.
Okay. Margaret wants to know, what has surprised you most in your first session?
Yeah, both the conversations that happen and the conversations that don't happen. I think that speed is used as a weapon in the General Assembly, where we are given bills the night before and expected to vote for them the next day. And someone who has prided themselves in sort of being prepared and studious, and sort of taking every opportunity I can get to know the most that I can about a subject. It's really hard to do in the General Assembly whenever you have to vote on 200 bills within the span of a week. You can't read everything, and it's certainly a team sport. And so you do depend a lot on your colleagues and folks who are much better versed on those policy issues than you are, to really lean on their advice and their perspective on if a bill is good or bad, and what we can do to change it. And so I think that I was both surprised at both the speed of things when they want it to be fast, but also the team nature of some of the offense and defense that can be played in the General Assembly. And so I appreciate the structure that has been created for the caucus. I think I don't know how much of this Leader Reeves shared when he was on the call with y'all. I guess this was last week, right, when y'all was booked with Leader Reeves. But we've really decentralized how we operate as a caucus and make sure that we have leaders on a number of different issues, and where we're really depending on more than one person, which I think is really a really effective way of letting folks shine in their expertise and their leadership styles, et cetera. And that's really allowed us to have a number of conversations and make sure that a lot of us are steering the ship at the same time. And so I've appreciated the mentorship, and really it truly is a family, right? I think that is something that enough folks don't talk about. Sure, even as Democrats, we're not always going to agree on everything, but I think Leader Reeves said this last week, we're all we got. And so I'd rather have that tough family conversation with y'all and with our caucus than with anyone else, because at the end of the day, we're fighting for this vision of what it means to be a part of an equitable, just North Carolina where everyone belongs. And I think that at the end of the day, that's what holds us together. And so yeah, I didn't think I could enter the General Assembly and then be a part of this process and be more proud of being a Democrat, but I think that's where I find myself right now.
Nice. Isabel would like to hear more about the current budget process in the General Assembly, both the governor's suggested budget for the state and the American Rescue Plan budget that he just released this afternoon. What do they expect for the timeline of each of these budgets' approval? When will we North Carolinians know what money will be appropriated for which efforts?
Yeah, so there's two separate budget processes happening. The budget, right, the big budget, and then the ARP money. And so we know that with the American Rescue Plan money, there's money that's coming to the state that we have to appropriate, and then there's money that's going directly to county governments. And so your county commissioners are probably already talking about this and understand how much money they're receiving. We just got our briefing today from the governor's office around their vision for the $5.6 billion in ARP money that Cooper had a press conference on just today. That is really pushing this once in a lifetime, once in a generation opportunity to have a transformative impact on our state when it comes to investing in broadband, investing in housing, investing in the parts of North Carolina where it can, with non-recurring funds, can really go a long way. And so that's the budget that Cooper has proposed on with that extra art money. And of course, the legislature will come with their own version to see of how they use that extra money that we have from the American Rescue Plan. As far as the budget, and so I'm not sure on the timeline there. We just started those conversations today, and so I can certainly provide more information on that later on this week. But as far as the big budget goes, that is currently this year. It starts in the House. It switches what chamber it starts in every session. So it started in the Senate, and so they still have it. And we should be seeing it in the House fairly soon from everything that I've heard, hopefully this month, which will then allow us to start our process and you know, with our own amendments, with our own changes, based on what the Senate has given our way. And then from there, seeing, you know, how that matches up with the governor's vision. He's already proposed his budget. He proposed his budget about 2 months ago. We all have that big, thick binder on our desk of the governor's budget. As far as timelines go, everyone has said over and over, leaders from each caucus and the governor, that they want to see a budget pass. Folks have certainly, the rhetoric and the mood has changed in the building a bit when it comes to wanting to come to some bipartisan consensus. And so, you know, I'm not great at these estimates in terms of how long it's going to take. I heard on a podcast from Representative say, you know, we might actually be getting this done by the end of June. Who knows? But I do anticipate this process being a lot smoother than years past, because everyone wants to see this done. And I don't think anybody wants to stay until December this year fighting over the budget. And so certainly keep y'all updated on how that pans out. But we should be getting started on our side here in the next few weeks.
Okay. Susan emailed us a question in advance, and I think she had canvassing in mind. What are the big issues in your district, and what are the issues that you hear about the most, and from whom do you hear?
Not surprisingly, housing. I think it's an issue that we don't talk about enough in the General Assembly, but something that everyone is feeling right now, right? Renters are feeling it in Alamance County. People who are trying to buy homes are feeling it because there's a nationwide shortage, all right, on supply of homes. Lumber is so expensive at the moment, and Alamance is growing so quickly. I mean, I think right now, if you were to sign on to Zillow, they are probably 40, 50 homes for sale. It's not a lot. And a realtor friend of mine told me that, maybe 10 years ago, there was on average probably 200, 300 plus homes for sale on a given day in Alamance County. And so you certainly see the dynamics in our communities changing, right? Where housing stock is low, and rents are rising and folks are hurting. So you couple that with a pandemic, you can see where housing instability is a real problem. And I don't think it's just a challenge for, low income folks and folks who may have been hit with unemployment over the last 12 months. I think it's folks who, were probably, working class families on the line, were probably used to, maybe living paycheck to paycheck, but, could find some stability in their lives, right? I think that's becoming harder and harder in Alamance County. And so that's an issue that certainly comes up a lot, and I'm very curious to hear from folks. Healthcare continues to be a conversation we have in education. Those were the two issues that we always talked about on the campaign, not just because they were nice talking points to have, but because that's what people want to talk about in Alamance County. And so when we think about recovery and economic security, folks at the end of the day want to make sure that they can take care of their families. And I think that's a lot of what we'll hear again this cycle, and especially when you're going to door knock. And so I am curious about what other issues you hear about, because I know that as folks are recovering from the pandemic, people are also concerned about, how do I get my kids into summer enrichment programs or something to get them connected to opportunities? And how do I just sort of create some normalcy and stability in my life as well? So we'll see what we hear on Sunday, but I'm certainly curious what else what types of conversations we have with folks as well.
Okay. Steve wants to know, how did Democrats do with turning out low propensity voters in Alamance County compared to how Republicans did? And is there a plan to identify and reach out to them in 2022?
Yeah, the hard-hitting question, Steve. I don't have the data in front of me. I think we did relatively well. We did well in a lot of our low propensity districts. We we did, at least with my numbers, I know that we were on par or slightly above Biden with a lot of the districts where we do see a lot of those low propensity voters. And so we certainly know that they were engaged. Unfortunately, we know that that was also the case on the Republican side, and they certainly beat us out, especially during early voting and on election day. And you could feel it at the polls. I think that that was certainly when the mood changed in Alamance County, when we saw big surges in Republican voters. That is certainly a tough question for me right now, Steve. I know that my district will likely be getting tougher. The Republican Party will do me no favors and aren't exactly thrilled that I took back this seat. And so there's, I'm sure, already plans with the redistricting this year to make this, as red as they can, right? Without getting into trouble, or even if they do get into trouble, they know they can at least get away with it with a cycle or two. And so I think that there's I think I was doing this data crunching with a friend a few weeks ago, and there's probably about 5,000 or 6,000 low propensity voters that didn't vote in Alamance County in 2020. And I think that might be Democrats. This is off the cuff, and so don't write down these numbers, but we can get them for you. And then there's about another 5,000 to 10,000 unregistered voters in Alamance County that we've been looking at about ways to target. And so there's plenty of work to be done here. I think it does have to be a combination of getting these low propensity voters out, as well as thinking about a voter registration effort that's robust here in Alamance County. And so that is certainly conversations that I'm having, thinking about how we can continue this momentum. Folks are excited about Alamance County right now, as they should be. I think being able to keep this county, at least part of it, blue, has to be a part of the statewide strategy and how we win in suburbs and exurbia across the state. Pitt County, Cabarrus County, I mean, those will continue being the battlegrounds in North Carolina. And so I think we have to invest heavily in this infrastructure here in order to win, not just in the short term, in the long term. And so we can have a beer and a much longer conversation about that, Steve, but I'm excited to talk to you about what that means in 2022 for us here.
Another question I got as an email: what are you going to do with the information that we collect at the doors when we canvass for you?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think our first to do after any canvas or any phone bank is responding to immediate needs. And so if there are things that people actually need, they have questions that we can answer, then we will certainly try to answer those immediately. Some of this is questions for other organizations, and so we were happy to pass along that information. But we certainly try to make sure that we service the needs of our constituents as quickly as possible. So that's our immediate sort of to do on any canvas. I'd say with issues especially, I think it's also informing what sort of digital and other sorts of communications we have with our constituents. And so if folks are only talking about housing, for example, right, and our message has been just on education and healthcare, then it means that we probably need to shift a little bit, right? I'm thinking about how we couple some of our canvassing, in-person canvassing and phone banks also with digital communication. And so Facebook ads and stuff, and making sure that I'm able to communicate what people want to hear about. And so I think these issues certainly inform that, and making sure that we're also advocating for those issues in Raleigh as well. I think that's really important.
Your campaign got some attention recently about how you did things differently in 2020 than some of the other campaigns. I mean, what were some of those things, and will you continue to do them going into 2022?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of it was, I'm reading the comments here, it was my direct contact with constituents. That's exactly what it was. I think that a lot of the conversation we just had with Brian, right, with Representative Farkas, I think was true for the campaign, where we really wanted to not just look like, I feel like a lot of campaigns try to paint the mirage that they are responsive to their constituents' needs, but it's still a relatively traditional campaign operation. We really wanted to have those authentic conversations with our voters and then respond to those questions and needs. And so, and so much of that was, it wasn't just me, right? It was us. Like, y'all are really good at having these phone calls. Y'all are really good at knocking these doors. Like, I didn't knock on 50,000 doors. I didn't call 75,000 people like we did that, right? And so I think it was the consistency of a field operation as well as all the other stuff campaigns do. And so I don't think we could have done it either or. And this is certainly not to, like, the article that you're referencing, Patience, is about how I just blew up the playbook. I don't think I blew up the playbook, because obviously some stuff does work well, right? Like, we know we have to invest in, mail and digital and TV and have an effective communications plan to be able to get our message out. But I think it's because we were also able to layer that communications with real people, having real conversations on the phone and at the doors. We canvassed a lot before COVID hit us. And then we also canvassed right in the last few weeks, right? Even with socially distanced lit drops. And so I do think that in the age of disinformation, in the age of this really broken trust with institutions, like, people to people, like, contact matters. And so the fact that we could reinforce something that they probably didn't trust, right? It was like a shiny mailer. Like, we sent out a ton of those, and the thing that people responded to the most wasn't the mail, it was the postcards, because it was like human writing, and it was like actual people talking to you. It was the phone calls that we made, it was the knock on the door or the hanger that you left, because it's like, oh, I actually, like, this isn't some like random spam bot on Facebook. This is actually like a person trying to reach me. And so I don't think there's enough research done on this right now, but I do think that the premium on that in-person contact, however it is, right, I think is going up. And I think it does matter a lot. And I think that's certainly what we're emphasizing. Part of what I want to do this cycle that I think is different and that I'm probably going to get some pushback on is that I want to invest early in our campaign in registering voters. So similar to what we were telling Steve, through mail, through canvassing, targeting this 5,000 to 10,000 people in the county that are unregistered to vote, getting a letter from your representative saying like, hey, your voice matters, you just register to vote. And then sending canvassers like Neighbors on Call saying like, hey, are you registered to vote? We've been working with some data from some third-party companies that might help us triangulate where those voters are. And then making sure we're getting as many people as possible registered to vote. That's going to require resources. And so I'm trying to figure out how I do that without getting in trouble because, we typically campaigns don't invest until later in the game. But I do think we have to have community captains and community organizers on the ground early, building these relationships, having the community cookouts to keep folks engaged. Because right now, especially in a time that the General Assembly can't pass a lot of bills that are going to support our working families, we have to be present and they have to know that we're working for them. And I think that's the only way to build trust right now in this environment.
Okay, great, thank you. And George commented just the fact, Ricky, that you had us, we phone bankers, give out your cell phone number and encourage constituents to call you was a great way to connect with people. I know I appreciated that when I phone banked as well. Becca, I'm going to hand it back to you.
That was a great place to end too. Thank you so much for your honest answers and taking all kinds of questions. And thank you everyone in the audience for your very good questions. Representative Hurtado, thank you for everything you do, for introducing us to Representative Farkas tonight and for giving us a way to take action now, which is what we really want to do. So everyone who's here are your next steps. If you have not already taken them, you can find all the links you need at neighborsoncall.org. Please sign up to Canvass on Sunday at 1 o'clock for Representative Hurtado. Feel free to take the silent canvasser option. It is still super helpful to be a silent canvasser because everyone needs a partner. So we really feel free to take that option. It's really helpful to us too. Get to know Representative Farkas on June 8th. That event is hosted by County to County. It's at 7 p.m. And then join a virtual phone bank for Representative Farkas on Monday, June 14th at 5:45 p.m. And feel free to ask for a phone bank buddy to hold your hand the whole time virtually. So thank you everyone for coming tonight, and we will see you soon. Good night.